The thunder rolled across the Montana Territory as Tabitha Neill clutched her travel-worn carpet bag tighter, staring at the dilapidated boarding house that would be her home now. It was 1874, and at 21 years of age, she had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to the frontier town of Silver Creek, only to find her last living relative, an aunt she'd never met, had died 3 months prior. Rain began to pelt the dusty main street as Tabitha stood frozen, watching her dreams wash away with the muddy rivulets forming at her feet. The stagecoach that had deposited her here was already disappearing around the bend, taking with it her last connection to civilization. "Miss, you planning on standing there till you drown?" The voice came from behind her, deep and rich, like molasses. Tabitha turned to see a tall man in a worn Stetson, water already streaming off its brim. His face was partially obscured by a neatly trimmed beard, but his eyes were the color of the whiskey her father used to drink. I don't know where to go," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the rain. "My aunt, Martha Neill. She was supposed to be here." The man's expression softened. "Martha passed on last winter. Pneumonia took her quick." He stepped closer, offering her shelter beneath the awning of the general store. "Name's Wade Quincy. I own the Double Q Ranch outside of town. Knew your aunt well." Tabitha felt her eyes sting with unshed tears.
"I'm Tabitha Neill."
"I've come all this way for nothing, it seems." Wade glanced down the muddy street. "Town's got a decent hotel. The Silver Spur. It ain't fancy, but it's clean. Let me take you there, at least until you figure things out." With few options and the rain coming down harder, Tabitha nodded. Wade picked up her carpet bag despite her protests and guided her through the downpour to a 2-story building with a faded sign swinging in the wind. Inside, the hotel lobby was warm and smelled of pine soap and coffee. An older woman with steel gray hair looked up from her ledger. "Wade Quincy, you're dripping all over my clean floor," she scolded, though there was affection in her tone. "Sorry, Mrs. Hollister. This here's Tabitha Neill, Martha's niece from back east. She needs a room." Mrs. Hollister's eyes widened. "Martha's niece? Land's sakes, child, we thought you weren't coming after all this time." "I wasn't informed of her passing," Tabitha explained, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with her damp clothes. "Well, you're here now." Mrs. Hollister pulled a key from beneath the counter. "Room 4, upstairs to the left. Wade, you might as well tell her about the property while I fix her something hot to drink." Wade shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps tomorrow would be better, after she's rested." "Property." Tabitha looked between them, confused. "Your aunt's place," Wade explained. "She left it to you, being her only kin. It's a small homestead, about 3 miles outside town. Nothing fancy, but it's yours if you want it." Tabitha felt her knees weaken.
"She
"Left me land. And a cabin. It needs work, but it's sound. I've been keeping an eye on it, making sure nobody squats there." Mrs. Hollister reappeared with a steaming cup. "Here you go, dear.
drink this."
Wade, stop hovering and sit down. Poor girl's had enough surprises for one day." Tabitha accepted the tea gratefully, her mind reeling. She'd come west with nothing but $20 to her name and the hope that her aunt might take her in. After the fire that had claimed her parents' boarding house in Boston and her parents with it, she'd had nowhere else to turn. "Thank you," she murmured, warming her hands on the cup. "Both of you." Wade removed his hat, revealing thick chestnut hair that curled slightly at the ends. "I reckon you'll want to see the place tomorrow. I can take you if you'd like." Tabitha studied him, trying to understand why this stranger would help her. In Boston, men had ulterior motives. But there was something straightforward about Wade Quincy that put her at ease. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Quincy." "Just Wade, madam. Out here, we don't stand much on formalities." Tabitha nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Wade, then." "And I'm Tabitha." The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous day's storm had never happened. Tabitha dressed in her second-best dress, a practical navy blue cotton with minimal trim, and twisted her chestnut hair into a simple knot. Wade was waiting in the hotel dining room, hat in his hands. He stood when she entered, and Tabitha couldn't help noticing how his tall frame commanded attention without effort. Several townsfolk nodded respectfully as she passed. "Morning, Tabitha. Sleep well?" "As well as could be expected," she replied honestly. "I'm anxious to see my aunt's property." Wade nodded. "We'll head out after breakfast. Mrs. Hollister's pancakes are worth the wait." True to his word, the pancakes were delicious, light and fluffy, with maple syrup that tasted of the wilderness itself. Tabitha found herself hungrier than she'd been in months. "Tell me about my aunt," she requested as they ate. "I never met her. My father, her brother, rarely spoke of her." Wade considered this as he poured more coffee. "Martha was independent. Came out here with her husband about 15 years ago. After he died in a mining accident, everyone expected her to go back east, but she stayed. Built that cabin herself, with some help from neighbors. Kept to herself mostly, but was always first to help when someone was sick or in need. She sounds formidable." That she was. Wade's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "She'd have liked you, I think. You've got that same look about you." "What look is that?" "Like you don't quit easy." After breakfast, Wade helped Tabitha into a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. The journey took them through town and out into open country, where the mountains rose in the distance like guardians watching over the valley. "It's beautiful," Tabitha breathed, taking in the vast landscape. "It grows on you," Wade agreed. "Different from Boston, I imagine." "In every way possible." She tugged her bonnet lower against the sun. "Boston was all noise and smoke and people pressed together, so tight you could barely breathe. This." She gestured to the open prairie. "This feels like freedom." Wade gave her a sidelong glance. "It can be. It can also be harsh. Winters are long, summers are short. It takes grit to make it out here." "My aunt managed." "That she did." They turned off the main trail onto a narrower path that wound through a copse of aspen trees. When they emerged, Tabitha saw a small cabin nestled against the backdrop of a gentle hill. A creek bubbled nearby, and a vegetable garden, now overgrown, stretched beside the house. "This is it," Wade announced, bringing the wagon to a halt. "Martha Neill's place. Your place now." Tabitha climbed down without waiting for his assistance, drawn to the cabin like a moth to flame. It was simple, a one-room structure with a stone chimney and a small porch. The door was sturdy, though weathered, and the windows were intact if dusty. Wade produced a key. "I've been by every couple weeks to check on things." Inside, the cabin was spare but clean. A bed stood in one corner, a table and two chairs in another. A cast-iron stove dominated the far wall, and shelves held dishes and cooking implements. It was humble, but it was more than Tabitha had dared hope for. "It's perfect," she whispered. Wade looked surprised. "It needs work. Roof leaks in the corner there, and the stovepipe needs replacing before winter. But it's mine." Tabitha ran her fingers over the rough-hewn table. "I've never owned anything before." Wade's expression softened. "Well, there's more. The garden's gone wild, but it could be salvaged. There's chickens in that coop out back. Neighbors have been tending them. And Martha kept a milk cow, though she's been living at my place since your aunt passed." Tabitha turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "I don't know the first thing about gardening or chickens or cows. Folks around here can help. That's how it works in these parts." Wade hesitated. "Course, if you decide to sell and go back east, I'd understand. Winter's coming in a few months, and it's no joke for someone alone." Tabitha thought of Boston, of the cramped boarding houses and the factory work that had been her only prospect after the fire. Then she looked around the sunlit cabin that somehow felt more like home than anywhere she'd been since her parents died. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "I'll learn what I need to learn." Wade's slow smile was like sunrise. "Well then, Miss Neill, welcome to Silver Creek." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Tabitha moved her few belongings to the cabin and began the process of making it her own. Wade proved true to his word about neighbors helping. Women from nearby homesteads arrived with preserves and dried goods, while their husbands offered to help with repairs. Wade himself came by almost daily, teaching Tabitha how to tend the chickens and care for Bessie, the gentle Jersey cow he'd brought back from his ranch. He showed her how to weed the garden and which wild plants were edible. "You're catching on quick," he commented one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Most city folks take longer to adjust."
"I'm motivated," Tabitha replied.
"Winter's coming, as you keep reminding me." Wade chuckled. "That I do. Speaking of which, we should start thinking about cutting firewood." Tabitha groaned dramatically. "Another skill I need to master? You're getting handy with an axe, but I figure we could make a day of it. Some of my men, and I could bring down a couple of dead trees for my property. It would set you up good for the winter." "You've already done so much," Tabitha protested. "I can't impose further." Wade's expression grew serious. "It's not an imposition. Out here, we look after one another. Your aunt would have expected no less from me." Tabitha studied him in the fading light. In the weeks since her arrival, Wade Quincy had become more than a helpful neighbor. He was her teacher, her guide to this new world, and increasingly, her friend. There was something about his quiet strength that made her feel safe for the first time since her parents' death. "Very well," she conceded. "But you must let me cook supper for you and your men afterward. It's the least I can do." Wade's smile returned.
"Deal."
3 days later, Wade arrived with 4 ranch hands and 2 wagons. The men worked efficiently, felling dead trees and cutting them to stove length while Tabitha provided coffee and sandwiches. By mid-afternoon, her woodpile was stacked high enough to last through the harshest winter. As promised, she prepared a hearty supper of venison stew with biscuits and apple pie for dessert. She'd been practicing her cooking, determined to master the cast iron stove that still intimidated her. When the meal was ready, Wade's men washed up outside while he helped Tabitha set the table. "One more chair," he said, looking around the small cabin. "There's only 5 of you," she pointed out, confused. Wade didn't respond. Instead, he retrieved another chair from beside his own at the head of the table and placed it next to where he would sit. "For you," he said simply. Tabitha stared at the chair, then at Wade. "I was going to serve and eat later." Wade shook his head. "That's not how we do things here. You're not a servant, Tabitha. You're the lady of this house." His voice lowered, so only she could hear. "And I'd be honored if you'd sit beside me." Something in his tone made her heart flutter. It wasn't just the words, but the way he looked at her like she mattered, like she belonged. The ranch hands filed in, and Wade pulled out her chair. As Tabitha took her seat, she felt a strange sense of rightness. This small gesture, placing her chair beside his, felt significant in ways she couldn't articulate. Throughout the meal, Wade included her in conversations, drew out her opinions, made her laugh. His men treated her with respect, and for the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, Tabitha felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was living. After the men departed with hearty thanks and tipped hats, Wade lingered to help clean up. "That was a fine meal," he said as he dried the last plate. "You've taken to frontier cooking like you were born to it." Tabitha smiled, pleased by the compliment. "I've had a good teacher."
"Several, in fact."
Mrs. Hollister's recipe for biscuits has been a revelation. Wade leaned against the counter, studying her. "You know, when you first arrived, soaked to the bone and looking lost, I wondered if you'd last a week out here. And now," Tabitha challenged, setting down her dishcloth. "Now I think Martha chose her heir well. You've got her spirit." Tabitha felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Wade straightened, suddenly looking nervous, an expression she'd never seen on his confident face. "Tabitha, there's a harvest dance in town this Saturday. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." The request took her by surprise. A dance? Nothing fancy. Just folks getting together at the schoolhouse. There's music, dancing, food. It's tradition before the hard work of harvest begins. Tabitha hesitated. In Boston, such an invitation would have clear implications about a man's intentions. Here in Silver Creek, she wasn't sure of the protocols. As friends, she asked cautiously. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, disappointment. Perhaps? If that's what you prefer. Tabitha realized with a start that she wanted more than friendship from this kind, steadfast man. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. "I would be delighted to accompany you, Wade," she said finally.
As
"Whatever you wish us to be." His smile was slow and sweet. "Then I'll pick you up at 6 on Saturday." The days leading up to the dance were filled with nervous anticipation. Tabitha fretted over her limited wardrobe until Mrs. Hollister arrived with a dress she'd sewn for her own daughter, who had moved to California the previous year. "It might need taking in," the older woman said, holding up a gown of deep green cotton. "But the color will suit you beautifully." Tabitha was touched by the kindness. "I couldn't possibly, nonsense. It's just gathering dust in my attic." "Besides," Mrs. Hollister added with a knowing smile, "Wade Quincy deserves to see you looking your best." Tabitha blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "Child, the whole town's been watching you two circle each other for weeks. Wade's never shown interest in any of the eligible ladies hereabouts, but he lights up like a lantern whenever you're around. He's been kind to me, that's all." Mrs. Hollister snorted. "Wade's kind to everybody. But he doesn't visit everybody's cabin daily, or bring them wildflowers, or look at them like they hung the moon." Tabitha had no response to that. She'd noticed the flowers' small bouquets of prairie blooms that appeared on her porch or windowsill. She'd assumed they were friendly gestures, not wanting to read more into them than was intended. "I'm still learning the ways of Silver Creek," she said finally. "Well, here's one lesson. Wade Quincy doesn't dance. Hasn't since his wife died 5 years ago." Tabitha's heart sank. His wife. He never mentioned. Sarah. Childbirth took her, and the baby both. Wade withdrew into himself after that, focused on building his ranch. "The fact that he's asked you to the dance. Well, it means something significant." When Saturday arrived, Tabitha dressed with special care. The green dress fit perfectly after minor alterations, and she pinned her hair up with her mother's pearl combs, one of the few treasures she'd salvaged from the fire. Wade arrived precisely at 6, his wagon freshly painted, and his clothes cleaner than she'd ever seen them. He wore a proper suit coat over his usual shirt, and his hair was neatly combed. But it was the look in his eyes when he saw her that took Tabitha's breath away. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted his hand to climb into the wagon. "You look quite handsome yourself." The schoolhouse was transformed for the occasion. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, desks had been pushed aside to create a dance floor, and a small band played lively tunes in the corner. Nearly the entire town seemed to be present, from elders in their Sunday best to children darting between groups of adults. Wade kept Tabitha's hand tucked in the crook of his arm as he introduced her to people she hadn't yet met. Everyone welcomed her warmly, and Tabitha felt a growing sense that she might truly belong in this community. When the band struck up a waltz, Wade turned to her with a question in his eyes. "Would you care to dance?" Remembering Mrs. Hollister's words about Wade never dancing, Tabitha felt the significance of the moment. "I would love to." Wade led her onto the floor with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as they moved in time to the music. "I'm told you don't usually dance," Tabitha ventured. Wade's step faltered briefly. "Mrs. Hollister's been talking, I see. She mentioned your wife. I'm sorry for your loss." Wade was quiet for several moments, guiding her through the steps before responding. "Sarah was a good woman. We were fond of each other, though it wasn't a love match. Her father and mine arranged it. Joining two ranches made sense. We were making the best of it when she died." Tabitha absorbed this. "You must have been devastated." "I was. Not just for Sarah, but for the child too. I always wanted a family." His eyes found hers. "I stopped dancing because it didn't seem right to enjoy such things when they couldn't. But lately, I've been thinking that life's too short not to embrace joy when you find it." His meaning was clear, and Tabitha felt her heart race. "And have you found joy?" Wade's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I believe I have. Ever since a certain Eastern lady appeared in the rain." The music ended, but they remained standing close together, oblivious to the couples moving around them. "Wade," Tabitha began, unsure what to say. "I know it's soon," he said quietly. "You've only been here a short while. But I feel something for you I never expected to feel again, or maybe at all. I don't want to rush you, but I wanted you to know." Tabitha thought of all he'd done for her, the kindnesses large and small, the patient teaching, the respect he'd shown her from the beginning. More than that, she thought of how safe she felt in his presence, how her day brightened when he appeared at her door. "I feel it too," she admitted, "though it terrifies me sometimes." Relief washed over his features. "Then we can take our time, get to know each other properly." The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. They danced until Tabitha's feet ached pleasantly, shared pie and coffee with neighbors, and listened to tall tales from old-timers. Through it all, Wade remained attentive, his hand finding hers when they sat side by side, his eyes seeking her out across the room. On the drive home, the night air was crisp with the promise of autumn. Stars blazed overhead in a way Tabitha had never seen in Boston, and the silence was profound, broken only by the creak of the wagon and the horses' steady hoofbeats. "I never thought I could love a place so different from what I've known," Tabitha mused. "But Silver Creek feels more like home than Boston ever did." Wade glanced at her. "Is it the place or the people?" "Both, I suppose. Though some people more than others." She smiled in the darkness. When they reached her cabin, Wade helped her down from the wagon, but didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he stood close, his face illuminated by moonlight. "Tabitha, may I call on you properly? Court you, as they say back east?" Her heart soared at the formal request. "Yes, Wade, I'd like that very much." He smiled and, with gentle deliberation, raised her hand to his lips. The kiss was brief, but sent warmth cascading through her. "Good night, Tabitha Neill. Sleep well." As autumn progressed into winter, Wade's courtship continued with steadfast devotion. He brought books for the long evenings, taught Tabitha to shoot a rifle for protection, and helped her prepare the cabin for the coming cold. Each Sunday, he escorted her to church, and afterward they would take dinner with various neighbors or at the hotel in town. Word spread quickly that Wade Quincy was courting Martha Neill's niece, and the town watched their romance blossom with approving eyes. Tabitha found herself welcomed into the tight-knit community not just as Martha's heir, but as a person in her own right. Their first kiss came on a crisp November evening. Wade had stayed late, banking her fire to last the night, when a sudden snowfall began. "First snow," he observed, watching the flakes drift past the window. "Always feels like a blessing when it comes gentle like this." Tabitha joined him at the window. "It's beautiful." Wade turned to her, snowlight reflected in his eyes. "So are you." The kiss was tentative at first, as if he feared she might pull away. But Tabitha leaned into him, her hands finding his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster. "I've wanted to do that since the dance," Wade confessed. "I've wanted you to," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. As winter settled over Silver Creek, their relationship deepened. Wade began staying for supper several nights a week, and Tabitha found herself looking forward to those evenings with increasing anticipation. They would talk for hours beside the fire, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. One night in early December, a blizzard struck without warning. Wade had come to check on her, bringing Christmas gifts from Town Fabric for a new dress and a book of poetry she'd mentioned wanting to read. "You shouldn't try to get back to your ranch in this," Tabitha said, peering out at the swirling snow. "The trail will be impossible to follow." Wade nodded, though he looked uncomfortable. "I can sleep in the barn with the animals." "Don't be ridiculous. It's freezing out there." Tabitha busied herself arranging blankets on the floor near the stove. "You can sleep here by the fire." "I'll take the bed." Despite his protests, Tabitha insisted, and they settled into an awkward domesticity. She changed behind a screen she'd fashioned from an old quilt, while Wade removed only his boots and outer shirt before lying down on his makeshift bed. "Good night, Wade," she called softly, blowing out the lamp. "Good night, Tabitha." But sleep proved elusive for both of them. Tabitha lay awake, acutely aware of Wade's presence just feet away. The intimacy of sharing the small cabin made her heart race in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. "Tabitha?" Wade's voice came through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes," she admitted. A pause, then, "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Tabitha's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too, Wade." She heard him shift, then his footsteps crossed the short distance to her bed. He knelt beside it, finding her hand in the darkness. "I wanted to do this properly, with a ring and everything," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "But I can't wait another day. Tabitha Neill, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in everything." Tears sprang to Tabitha's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." His lips found hers in the darkness, sealing their promise with a kiss that spoke of devotion and desire. They were married on Christmas Day in the town's small church, with all of Silver Creek in attendance. Tabitha wore a dress of deep blue wool that Mrs. Hollister and the other women had helped her sew, with a sprig of evergreen pinned to her bodice. Wade, resplendent in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with such naked adoration that Tabitha felt her heart might burst from happiness. "I take you, Tabitha, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade drew her into a kiss that brought cheers from the congregation. The celebration afterward at the hotel was joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the town twice over. But what Tabitha remembered most was the moment Wade led her to the head table for the wedding supper. Once again, he placed her chair beside his, just as he had that evening months ago when she'd first felt like she belonged. But this time, as he held her chair, he leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Welcome home, Mrs. Quincy." 3 years later, Tabitha sat on the porch of the ranch house Wade had built for them, watching her husband ride in from checking the cattle. Their daughter, 1-year-old Sarah, played at her feet, while Tabitha's rounded belly promised another addition to their family in the coming months. The Double Q Ranch had prospered under their joint stewardship. Tabitha had brought Eastern business sense to complement Wade's practical knowledge, and together they'd expanded their holdings and improved their breeding stock. Her aunt's cabin still stood. They'd preserved it and used it as a guest house for visiting friends or new settlers needing temporary shelter. Tabitha often went there to tend the garden that now flourished under her experienced care. Wade dismounted and lifted Sarah high, eliciting squeals of delight from the toddler. He carried her up the steps to kiss Tabitha thoroughly. "How are my girls today?" he asked, settling beside her with Sarah on his knee. "We're well. Your son has been kicking up a storm, though." Tabitha guided his hand to her belly, where the baby obligingly demonstrated its strength. Wade's face lit with wonder, as it did every time he felt the child move. Strong like his mama, Tabitha leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "I was thinking about that day in the rain when I first arrived. How lost I felt. And now—" She looked around at the home they'd built together, not just the physical structure, but the life they shared, the family they'd created, the community that had embraced her. "Now I know exactly where I belong," she said. "Right here, beside you." Wade's arm tightened around her shoulders. "When I put that chair beside mine at supper all those years ago, I was hoping you'd stay there forever." Tabitha smiled, remembering. That simple gesture had been the beginning of everything. The moment she realized she wasn't alone in the world after all. "I thought I had no family," she said softly, "until a certain cowboy showed me what family truly means." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, casting golden light across the land they both loved, Wade kissed her again, a promise renewed with each passing day. And Tabitha Neill Quincy, once a lost Boston girl with nothing but a carpetbag and desperate hope, knew she had found her forever home.